Margaret Chun adjusted her worn leather jacket as she stepped into the marble lobby of First National Bank. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. She had deliberately chosen her most casual clothes for this visit: faded jeans, comfortable sneakers, and a simple white t-shirt. Her graying hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she carried a small, unremarkable handbag. The bank buzzed with typical Monday morning activity. Customers stood in neat lines while tellers processed transactions behind bulletproof glass. Security guards positioned themselves strategically throughout the space, their eyes constantly scanning for any signs of trouble. Margaret took her place in line. Observing the familiar routine she had watched countless times from a very different perspective. 3 people stood ahead of her. A young mother bounced a fussy baby while trying to manage her paperwork. An elderly gentleman in a crisp suit tapped his fingers impatiently against his briefcase. A construction worker still covered in dust from his morning shift checked his phone repeatedly. Margaret listened to their quiet conversations about bills, mortgages, and everyday financial concerns. Next customer, called Maria Rodriguez from window number 3. Maria had worked at this branch for 8 years, starting as a part-time teller while finishing college. She had worked her way up to senior teller, earning respect from both customers and colleagues. Her professional demeanor and genuine care for customers had made her one of the branch's most valued employees. Margaret approached the window with a warm smile. "Good morning, Maria. How are you today?" Maria looked up from her computer screen, slightly surprised that this casual customer knew her name. The nameplate on her window clearly displayed her information, but most customers barely acknowledged the staff as individuals. "I'm doing well, thank you. How can I help you today?" "I'd like to make a withdrawal from my checking account," Margaret said, sliding a worn debit card across the counter. The card showed signs of regular use, with slightly faded numbers and a few small scratches across its surface. Maria accepted the card and inserted it into her terminal. She typed Margaret's PIN as the older woman provided it, then waited for the account information to load. The screen populated with basic account details, showing a modest checking account balance of $843. "What amount would you like to withdraw today?" Maria asked, her fingers poised over the keyboard. "I need to take out $6,000, Margaret replied calmly, as if requesting such an amount was perfectly normal. Maria's eyebrows rose slightly. She glanced at her screen again, confirming the account balance. "Ma'am, I'm showing a balance of $843 in your checking account. You don't have sufficient funds for that withdrawal amount." Margaret nodded understandingly. "Could you check if there are any other accounts linked to this card? Sometimes the system doesn't show everything immediately." Maria performed a more comprehensive account search, checking for savings accounts, money market accounts, or certificates of deposit that might be connected to Margaret's profile. After several minutes of searching through different screens, she found only the single checking account. "I've done a complete search, and I only see the one checking account with the balance I mentioned," Maria explained professionally. "Would you like to withdraw a different amount that's within your available balance?" Margaret remained calm and patient. "I understand this might seem unusual, but could you possibly check with your manager? There might be some additional verification needed for my account." Maria hesitated. Bank policy required manager approval for any unusual requests, especially when customers claimed to have funds that didn't appear in the system. She had encountered similar situations before, usually involving customers who had confused their account balances or were attempting to withdraw money they didn't actually have. "Of course, let me get someone to help," Maria said politely. "It'll just take a moment." She pressed a button on her terminal to request manager assistance. Within 2 minutes, David Thompson approached the window. David had been the branch manager for 3 years, having transferred from the downtown location after receiving a promotion. He was known for his strict adherence to bank policies and his somewhat impatient attitude toward customers who didn't come prepared with proper documentation. "What seems to be the issue here?" David asked, his tone already suggesting mild irritation. Maria quickly explained the situation. "This customer is requesting a $6,000 withdrawal, but her account only shows a balance of $843. She's asking us to check for additional accounts or verification." David looked at Margaret with barely concealed skepticism. He had seen numerous attempts by customers to withdraw funds they didn't have, often involving elaborate stories about hidden accounts or pending deposits. His experience had taught him to be immediately suspicious of such requests. "Ma'am, our system is very accurate," David said curtly. "If the funds aren't showing in your account, then they're not available for withdrawal. We can't create money that doesn't exist." Margaret maintained her composed demeanor. "I appreciate your diligence, Mr. Thompson. However, I believe there may be some additional verification protocols that haven't been followed. Could you perhaps check with your regional office?" David's irritation grew more obvious. He glanced at Margaret's casual appearance, taking in her worn clothing and unassuming accessories. In his experience, customers with significant banking relationships dressed appropriately for their financial status. This woman's appearance suggested someone of modest means attempting to access funds she clearly didn't possess. "Ma'am, I've been in banking for over 15 years, David said with condescending authority. "I know how our systems work. There are no hidden accounts or special verification protocols. Your account balance is what it is." The line behind Margaret was growing longer. Other customers began shifting impatiently, checking their watches and whispering among themselves. David was acutely aware of the building tension and wanted to resolve this situation quickly. Margaret remained unflappable. "I understand your position, but I'm quite certain about my account status. Perhaps we could step aside so you can make a more thorough investigation without holding up other customers." David's patience was wearing thin. He interpreted Margaret's persistence as either delusion or an attempt at some kind of banking fraud. Either way, he wanted this interaction to end quickly and decisively. "Look, I don't know what game you're trying to play here," David said, raising his voice slightly. "But I'm not going to waste any more time pretending you have money you clearly don't have. Your account has $843. That's it. Period." Margaret's expression remained neutral, but she made a mental note of David's unprofessional tone and dismissive attitude. Around them, other customers and staff members began paying attention to the increasingly tense conversation. "Mr. Thompson, I'm simply asking for proper verification procedures to be followed," Margaret said evenly. "Surely that's not unreasonable for a banking customer to request." David's face reddened with frustration. In his mind, this woman was being deliberately difficult, wasting everyone's time with impossible demands. He decided to end the conversation with a statement that would make his position absolutely clear. "Ma'am, even if you could somehow prove you had the funds, which you can't, I still wouldn't authorize this withdrawal," David declared loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. "But here's what I'll do. I'll pay you double if you can show me a balance that supports your ridiculous request." The lobby fell notably quieter as David's challenge echoed through the space. Several customers turned to watch the unfolding drama. Maria looked uncomfortable with her manager's unprofessional behavior, but remained silent. Margaret smiled quietly to herself. "Double, you said?" "That's right," David replied smugly. "Double, because I'm absolutely certain you can't prove you have that kind of money in this bank." Margaret reached into her handbag and pulled out a different card, this one made of distinctive black metal with subtle gold lettering. She placed it gently on the counter in front of Maria. "Perhaps you could try this card instead," Margaret suggested calmly. Maria picked up the card and immediately noticed its weight and unusual material. The name on the card read M. Chun, with a series of numbers she didn't recognize. Below the numbers, in small print, were the words, "Chairman's Access, Unlimited Authorization." "I've never seen a card like this before," Maria admitted, looking uncertain. David glanced at the card dismissively. "Probably some kind of fake premium card she bought online. Don't waste time with it." But Maria's training kicked in. Any card she didn't recognize required special handling procedures. She inserted the black card into her terminal and waited for the system response. The screen immediately changed to a format she had never seen before. Instead of the usual account information display, a special authentication screen appeared with multiple security clearance levels. The system requested additional verification protocols that Maria had heard about in training, but never actually encountered. Mr. Thompson," Maria said hesitantly. "This card is triggering some kind of special authentication sequence. I think we need to follow enhanced verification procedures." David stepped closer to look at the screen, his confident expression beginning to waver. The authentication interface was indeed something outside his normal experience, but he wasn't about to admit uncertainty in front of a customer he had just challenged so publicly. "It's probably just a system glitch," David said, though his voice lacked its previous certainty. "Try running it again." Maria attempted to process the card a second time. The same authentication screen appeared, but this time with an additional message: "Executive authorization required. Contact regional security immediately." Margaret watched the exchange with quiet amusement. She had been hoping to conduct a simple, anonymous transaction to test the branch's customer service standards. Instead, she had stumbled into a situation that would provide valuable insights into staff training and management practices. "Perhaps we should follow the system's instructions," Margaret suggested mildly. "It seems to be requesting some kind of regional contact." David's discomfort was becoming more obvious. He had never encountered this type of system response, and his earlier confidence was rapidly eroding. However, his pride prevented him from backing down from the challenge he had issued so publicly. "Fine," David said tersely. "We'll make the call. But this is just going to confirm what I already told you." Maria picked up her secure phone line and dialed the regional security number displayed on her screen. After providing her employee identification and explaining the situation, she was transferred to a senior administrator. The conversation that followed was brief, but intense. Maria's expression changed dramatically as she listened to instructions from the regional office. She ended the call and turned to David with obvious concern. "Mr. Thompson, regional security wants to speak with you immediately. They said it's regarding a Code 7 authentication situation." David's face went pale. Code 7 was a designation he had heard mentioned in management training but had never encountered in practice. It indicated the presence of a high-level executive or major stakeholder requiring special handling protocols. He accepted the phone with trembling hands. "This is David Thompson, branch manager at the 5th Street location." The voice on the other end was crisp and authoritative. "Mr. Thompson, you are currently serving Margaret Shun, chairman of the board of First National Bank. She is conducting an unannounced inspection of branch operations. You are to provide her with complete assistance and any services she requests. Is this understood?" David's legs nearly gave out beneath him. He gripped the counter for support, staring at Margaret with dawning horror. The woman he had just humiliated and challenged was not only a customer. She was the single most powerful person in the entire banking organization. "Yes, sir." "Understood," David managed to whisper. He handed the phone back to Maria, who continued to receive additional instructions about proper protocols for executive visits. Meanwhile, David stood frozen, realizing the magnitude of his error. Margaret observed his reaction with interest. As chairman of the board, she made regular unannounced visits to branches throughout the system, always in casual dress, to see how staff truly treated ordinary customers. This visit had exceeded her expectations in revealing significant training gaps and attitude problems. "So, Mr. Thompson," Margaret said quietly, "about that double payment you mentioned." David opened and closed his mouth several times without producing sound. Around them, other customers and staff members had begun to realize that something extraordinary was happening. The casual woman in worn jeans was clearly someone of tremendous importance, and their branch manager appeared to be in serious trouble. Maria completed her call and turned back to her terminal. Following the instructions she had received, she accessed Margaret's actual executive account. The screen filled with numbers that made her gasp audibly. The account showed available funds in the tens of millions of dollars, with additional access to emergency credit lines and executive privileges that Maria had only read about in training materials. This was clearly the account of someone with unlimited banking authority. "The withdrawal amount of $6,000 has been approved," Maria announced, her voice filled with newfound respect and barely contained amazement. Margaret nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, Maria. You've been very professional throughout this entire situation." David remained silent, his mind racing through the implications of his behavior. He had publicly challenged and insulted the chairman of the board, promising to pay double if she could prove her account status. Now he faced the humiliating reality that his challenge had been not only wrong, but spectacularly inappropriate. The other customers in the lobby were beginning to whisper among themselves, piecing together fragments of what they had witnessed. Word was spreading that the seemingly ordinary woman had somehow turned the tables on an arrogant bank manager in dramatic fashion. Margaret accepted her cash from Maria and prepared to leave. However, she paused and turned back to David, who was still struggling to process what had happened. "Mr. Thompson, about our arrangement," she said with a slight smile. "You promised to pay me double if I could show a balance supporting my withdrawal. Since I've demonstrated access to considerably more than $6,000, I believe that makes your obligation $12,000. David's face went completely white. Not only had he insulted his ultimate superior, but he had also committed himself to a payment he couldn't possibly afford on his manager's salary. Margaret let him suffer for a moment before continuing. "However, I think we can consider that debt forgiven in exchange for some valuable lessons learned today." The relief on David's face was palpable, though he knew his troubles were far from over. An incident report would certainly be filed, and his future with the bank was now very much in question. Margaret Chin sat in her car outside the bank for several minutes, making notes on her tablet about the morning's encounter. As chairman of the board, she conducted these unannounced inspections quarterly, visiting different branches to evaluate customer service standards and staff performance. Today's experience at the 5th Street location had been among the most revealing she had encountered. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from James Morrison, the regional vice president. News of the incident had already reached the executive level through the security authentication protocols. "Margaret, I just heard about what happened at 5th Street, James said, his voice tight with concern. "I'm so sorry you had to experience that kind of treatment." "Actually, James, it was quite educational," Margaret replied calmly. "It showed me exactly what happens when we don't properly train our management staff on customer service principles and executive protocols." James had worked with Margaret for over a decade and knew her methodical approach to problem solving. She never reacted emotionally to operational issues, preferring instead to use them as learning opportunities for systematic improvements. "What do you want me to do about Thompson?" James asked. "Nothing yet," Margaret said. "I want to observe how this situation unfolds naturally. Let's see how the branch handles the aftermath and what kind of reporting procedures are followed. It will give us valuable insights into our management systems." Inside the bank, David Thompson sat in his office with the door closed, his head in his hands. The magnitude of his error was overwhelming. He had not only insulted the most powerful person in the company, but had done so in front of customers and staff members. Word would certainly spread throughout the branch, and probably beyond. Maria knocked on his door gently. "Mr. Thompson? There are customers waiting who need manager approval for various transactions." David looked up with bloodshot eyes. The normal operations of the bank had to continue despite his personal crisis. He opened his door and attempted to resume his duties, but everyone could see the dramatic change in his demeanor. The construction worker who had been waiting in line approached Maria's window with obvious curiosity. "What was that all about? That lady seemed pretty important." Maria maintained her professional discretion. "I'm sorry, but I can't discuss specific customer interactions. How can I help you today?" But the story was already spreading beyond the bank's walls. The young mother with the baby had posted on social media about witnessing a bank manager get completely owned by a customer who turned out to be someone really important. Within an hour, the post had been shared dozens of times by people fascinated by the story of apparent karma in action. Margaret drove to the regional headquarters, a gleaming office tower downtown. She had originally planned to spend the morning reviewing quarterly reports, but the 5th Street incident required immediate analysis. As she entered the executive floor, her assistant Rebecca greeted her with a concerned expression. "I heard there was some kind of situation at one of the branches," Rebecca said. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Rebecca. It was actually quite informative," Margaret replied. "Could you schedule a meeting with the Human Resources Director and the Training Department head for this afternoon? We need to discuss some immediate improvements to our customer service protocols." Margaret's approach to leadership was built on systemic solutions rather than individual punishment. While David Thompson's behavior had been unacceptable, the real problem lay in training gaps and oversight failures that had allowed such attitudes to develop. She spent the next hour reviewing David's personnel file. His record showed satisfactory performance reviews and no previous customer service complaints. However, She noticed that his management training had been minimal, consisting primarily of technical banking procedures rather than customer relations and professional communication skills. The file also revealed that David had been promoted to branch manager primarily based on his technical knowledge and sales numbers, with little consideration for his interpersonal skills or customer service philosophy. This pattern was common throughout the organization and represented a significant training deficiency. Back at the Fifth Street branch, David attempted to conduct a routine staff meeting, but the atmosphere was tense and uncomfortable. Everyone had heard about his confrontation with the mysterious customer, and many had witnessed his dramatic change in behavior afterward. Sarah Williams, one of the newer tellers, raised her hand hesitantly. "Mr. Thompson, some customers have been asking questions about what happened this morning. How should we respond?" David's face flushed red. He hadn't prepared for this inevitable consequence of his public humiliation. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding that has been resolved. But Sarah's question revealed another problem. The staff had no guidance on how to handle unusual situations or customer inquiries about internal matters. Their training had focused on routine transactions, leaving them unprepared for circumstances outside normal procedures. Maria, meanwhile, was struggling with her own concerns. As the teller who had processed Margaret's transaction, she wondered whether she had handled the situation correctly. She had followed proper authentication procedures when presented with the unusual card, but she questioned whether she should have done more to support the customer when David became confrontational. During her lunch break, Maria called her former supervisor from another branch to seek advice. "Lisa, I had the strangest situation today. A customer came in with a card I'd never seen before, and when I followed the authentication procedures, it turned out she was someone really important at the bank." Lisa Patterson had 15 years of banking experience and had seen many unusual situations. "What kind of card was it?" "Black metal with gold lettering, and it triggered some kind of executive authentication sequence," Maria explained. "The customer was really calm and professional, but my manager treated her terribly before we figured out who she was." Lisa was quiet for a moment. "Maria, that sounds like one of the executive access cards. We learned about them in advanced training, but I've never actually seen one. They're only issued to board members and senior executives for conducting unannounced inspections." The realization hit Maria like a physical blow. "You mean she was there specifically to evaluate our service?" "That's exactly what I mean," Lisa confirmed. "And from what you're telling me, your branch probably failed that evaluation pretty spectacularly." Margaret spent her lunch hour reviewing customer service complaint data from all regional branches. The Fifth Street location showed average statistics, not the worst in the system, but not exemplary either. However, she suspected that many customers simply didn't bother to file formal complaints when they received poor service, choosing instead to take their business elsewhere. She also examined the branch's employee turnover rates. While not excessive, there had been a steady stream of departures among frontline staff over the past 2 years. Exit interviews mentioned management stress and difficult work environment as contributing factors. The pattern suggested that David Thompson's behavior toward her had not been an isolated incident, but rather representative of his general management style. This made the situation more serious than a single customer service failure. At 2 o'clock, Margaret met with Jennifer Walsh, the Human Resources Director, and Michael Chun, no relation, head of the training department. She described the morning's events in detail, emphasizing the systemic issues rather than individual failures. "The problem isn't just one manager's attitude," Margaret explained. "It's that our training programs don't adequately prepare branch managers for customer relations challenges or teach them to handle unusual situations professionally." Jennifer nodded grimly. "We've been focusing training budgets on technical compliance and sales targets. Customer service training has been treated as secondary." Michael added, "Most of our management training assumes that customer interactions will be routine. We don't prepare managers for difficult conversations or situations where their authority might be questioned." Margaret leaned back in her chair, considering the scope of necessary changes. "I want you to develop a comprehensive customer service training program for all management staff. It should include role-playing exercises for difficult situations and clear protocols for handling unusual requests or authentication procedures." She paused, then, continued, "I also want random customer service evaluations implemented across all branches. Not announced inspections like today, but trained evaluators posing as regular customers to assess real-world service quality." Jennifer made detailed notes. "What about existing managers who need immediate retraining? We'll start with a system-wide refresher course focusing on professional communication and customer respect," Margaret decided. "Any manager who can't demonstrate acceptable customer service standards will need to be reassigned or replaced." The implications were significant. Changing the bank's service culture would require substantial investment in training and possible staff turnover. However, Margaret knew that customer retention and reputation were essential for long-term success. Back at the Fifth Street branch, the afternoon brought new challenges. Several customers who had witnessed the morning's confrontation returned with friends or family members, hoping to see additional drama. The unusual attention was disruptive to normal operations and made the staff increasingly uncomfortable. David found himself unable to concentrate on routine tasks. Every time he interacted with customers, he wondered whether they had heard about his humiliation or whether they might also be important people he was failing to recognize properly. At 3:30, an elegantly dressed elderly gentleman approached Maria's window requesting assistance with a complex trust fund transaction. David automatically assumed this customer required special attention based solely on his appearance and demeanor. "Let me handle this personally," David told Maria, stepping forward with exaggerated courtesy. "How may I assist you today, sir?" The gentleman, Harold Peterson, was a retired teacher living on a modest pension. His formal appearance resulted from a job interview earlier that day, not significant wealth. He was puzzled by David's obsequious behavior, but needed help with his straightforward transaction. "I just need to transfer some money between accounts," Harold said simply. David treated the routine request as if it were a major financial transaction, personally escorting Harold to his office and offering refreshments. The excessive attention made Harold uncomfortable and annoyed other customers who received far less consideration. Maria watched this interaction with growing concern. David seemed to have overcompensated for his earlier mistake by treating well-dressed customers with extreme deference while continuing to show little consideration for those who appeared ordinary. The lesson Margaret had hoped to teach about treating all customers with equal respect had clearly not been learned. Instead, David had simply adjusted his prejudices to focus on external appearances while missing the fundamental principle entirely. The next morning brought unexpected developments to the Fifth Street branch. Margaret Shun arrived early at her headquarters office to find dozens of emails from customers who had heard about the previous day's incident through social media and word of mouth. The story had evolved and grown as it spread, becoming a symbol of ordinary people finally getting justice against arrogant service providers. Most of the emails were positive, praising the bank for having leadership that cared about customer treatment. However, some customers expressed concern about whether the respectful treatment would only apply to wealthy or important clients. These messages reinforced Margaret's conviction that systematic changes were necessary. Her assistant Rebecca knocked on the door at 7:30. "Margaret, there's been an interesting development. 3 local news stations have called asking for interviews about yesterday's customer service incident. Apparently, the story has gone viral on social media." Margaret frowned as she reviewed the media requests. While she appreciated public interest in customer service issues, she preferred to handle internal problems through systematic improvements rather than public relations campaigns. "Decline the interviews, but prepare a statement about our commitment to exceptional customer service for all clients," Margaret instructed. "Focus on the positive changes we're implementing rather than the specific incident." At the Fifth Street branch, David Thompson arrived to find a small crowd of curious onlookers outside the building. Some were legitimate customers, but others had come hoping to witness additional drama. The unusual attention created an uncomfortable atmosphere for both staff and serious banking clients. Inside, Maria Rodriguez and her colleagues were struggling to maintain normal operations while fielding questions from reporters and social media influencers who wanted details about the confrontation. The staff had not been trained to handle media inquiries and felt overwhelmed by the attention. David called an emergency staff meeting before the bank opened to the public. His appearance showed the strain of the past 24 hours. rumpled clothing, bloodshot eyes, and visible stress. The confident demeanor he had displayed throughout his management career had completely disappeared. "I know yesterday was unusual," David began hesitantly. "We need to focus on providing excellent customer service while avoiding any additional complications." Sarah Williams, one of the newer tellers, raised her hand. "Mr. Thompson, customers keep asking about what happened yesterday. What should we tell them?" David had spent the night rehearsing various responses, but remained uncertain about the best approach. "Just say that we had a customer service situation that was resolved satisfactorily, and we're committed to serving all customers professionally." She had seen social media posts about the incident and was curious about what had really happened. "Good morning, Maria," Janet said warmly. "I heard there was some excitement here yesterday." Maria attempted to follow David's instructions. "We had a customer service situation that was resolved satisfactorily. How can I help you today?" But Janet had known Maria for 3 years and could see the stress in her expression. "Are you okay? You seem upset about something." The personal concern broke through Maria's professional reserve. "It's been a difficult couple of days. Sometimes customers aren't who they appear to be, you know?" Janet's curiosity intensified. "What do you mean?" Before Maria could respond, David appeared beside her window. His nervous energy and obvious anxiety made the situation more intriguing rather than less. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem at all," Janet replied, studying David's demeanor carefully. "I was just making my regular deposit." David hovered nearby throughout the transaction, clearly uncomfortable with any customer interaction that might evolve beyond routine business. His behavior confirmed for Janet that something significant had indeed happened, even though she couldn't determine the specific details. Meanwhile, Margaret Chun was reviewing the personnel files of all branch managers in the regional system. The Fifth Street incident had prompted her to examine whether similar attitude problems existed elsewhere in the organization. Her review revealed concerning patterns. Many branch managers had been promoted based primarily on sales performance and technical banking knowledge, with minimal evaluation of their customer service skills or leadership capabilities. The promotion criteria that had elevated David Thompson were standard throughout the company. Jennifer Walsh from Human Resources joined Margaret for a comprehensive analysis of management training programs. "We've been treating customer service as a soft skill that managers would naturally develop," Jennifer admitted. "Our formal training focuses almost exclusively on regulatory compliance and profit targets." Margaret studied training schedules from the past 5 years. "I see extensive coursework on anti-money laundering procedures and credit risk assessment, but nothing about conflict resolution or professional communication skills." The training gap explained why David had been so poorly equipped to handle an unusual customer interaction. His technical banking knowledge was solid, but he lacked the interpersonal skills necessary for effective customer service leadership. "We need to completely redesign our management development program," Margaret decided. "Customer service should be weighted equally with technical competencies in all promotion decisions." At the Fifth Street branch, the morning brought a steady stream of customers who had heard various versions of the previous day's story. Each interaction presented new challenges for staff members who were unprepared for the unusual attention. Thomas Bradley, a retired postal worker, approached Sarah's window with obvious excitement. "I heard someone got the better of your manager yesterday. Is it true?" Sarah glanced nervously toward David's office. "I can't really discuss specific customer interactions, Mr. Bradley." "Come on, just between us," Thomas pressed. "Was it really the bank chairman who caught him being rude?" Sarah's shocked expression confirmed more than any verbal response could have. The story had evolved to identify Margaret specifically as the bank chairman, adding another layer of drama to an already compelling narrative. David, watching from his office, realized that attempts to suppress discussion were failing. The staff's obvious discomfort with their prepared responses only fueled more speculation and curiosity. He needed a different approach, but had no idea what that might be. At 11 o'clock, an unexpected visitor arrived at the branch. James Morrison, the regional vice president, entered through the main lobby rather than using the private entrance typically reserved for executives. His presence immediately elevated the tension level throughout the building. Maria noticed him first and quickly alerted David through their internal communication system. David emerged from his office looking even more stressed than before, unsure whether this visit represented support or additional scrutiny. "Good morning, David," James said with professional neutrality. "I'd like to speak with you privately about recent events." They retreated to David's office while the staff and customers speculated about this new development. The presence of a senior executive confirmed for everyone that the previous day's incident had been truly significant. Behind closed doors, James outlined the situation from the corporate perspective. "Margaret's inspection revealed some serious training deficiencies that extend beyond your individual actions. However, your specific behavior requires immediate attention." David's hands trembled as he listened to the formal assessment of his performance. "I know I made a terrible mistake. I was just trying to prevent what I thought was banking fraud." "The problem isn't that you were cautious about a large withdrawal," James explained. "The problem is how you treated a customer who was asking reasonable questions. Your tone was disrespectful, and your public challenge was completely inappropriate." James had reviewed security footage of the incident as part of his preparation for this meeting. David's behavior had been even worse than the initial report suggested, showing a pattern of escalating rudeness rather than a single error in judgment. "What happens now?" David asked quietly. "You'll be attending intensive customer service training starting Monday," James informed him. "Additionally, you'll be working with a management coach to develop better communication skills. Your performance will be closely monitored for the next 6 months." The remedial measures represented David's last opportunity to salvage his career with the bank. Failure to demonstrate significant improvement would result in termination or demotion to a non-management position. Outside David's office, the staff continued serving customers while trying to maintain professional composure. However, the presence of the regional vice president had created an atmosphere of uncertainty that affected everyone's performance. Margaret spent her lunch hour visiting another branch in the system, conducting a similar unannounced inspection. This time, she was treated with consistent professionalism by all staff members, regardless of her casual appearance. The contrast highlighted how much the Fifth Street branch had deviated from acceptable service standards. Her experience at the second branch confirmed that the problems at Fifth Street were not universal throughout the organization. Most branches maintained adequate customer service standards, suggesting that targeted improvements could be effective rather than requiring complete system overhaul. However, Margaret also noticed that even the better branches showed room for improvement in handling unusual situations. Staff members were generally polite and helpful with routine transactions, but became uncertain when faced with requests outside their normal experience. This observation reinforced her decision to implement comprehensive training programs that would prepare all employees for a wider range of customer interactions. The goal was not just to prevent future incidents like the Fifth Street confrontation, but to elevate service quality throughout the entire organization. Back at the Fifth Street branch, James Morrison completed his meeting with David and prepared to address the staff. The employees had been anxiously waiting to learn how the morning's developments would affect their work environment. "I want everyone to know that the bank is committed to providing excellent customer service," James announced to the gathered staff. "Recent events have highlighted some areas where we can improve our training and support systems." He paused to make eye contact with each team member. Your individual 3 weeks after the confrontation, Margaret Chin reviewed progress reports from the comprehensive changes that had been implemented throughout the banking system. The Fifth Street incident had catalyzed reforms that extended far beyond a single branch, affecting training protocols, management oversight, and customer service standards across the entire organization. The new customer service training program had been fast-tracked through development and was already being piloted at 5 locations. The curriculum included extensive role-playing exercises that simulated difficult customer interactions, teaching managers how to maintain professionalism even under pressure. Margaret's assistant Rebecca entered her office with the morning briefings. The customer satisfaction surveys from the pilot branches are showing remarkable improvement. Scores have increased by an average of 23% in just 3 weeks. This rapid improvement confirmed Margaret's belief that the problems had been systemic rather than isolated. When provided with proper training and clear expectations, bank employees demonstrated the ability to deliver exceptional customer service consistently. At the Fifth Street branch, the transformation was particularly dramatic. David Thompson had completed his intensive customer service training and was working with executive coach Patricia Williams to develop better communication skills. The combination of formal training and personal coaching was producing noticeable changes in his approach to customer interactions. Maria Rodriguez had been promoted to assistant branch manager in recognition of her exemplary handling of the authentication situation. Her new role included responsibility for training other staff members on proper procedures for unusual customer requests and executive authentication protocols. The branch had also received 2 new tellers to handle increased customer volume. Word of the improved service quality had spread throughout the community, attracting new customers who appreciated the respectful treatment they received regardless of their appearance or account balance. On this particular morning, a familiar figure entered the lobby. Margaret Chun, once again dressed in casual clothing, had returned to conduct a follow-up inspection. She wanted to evaluate the effectiveness of the changes that had been implemented and observe whether the improvements were sustainable. She took her place in line behind an elderly woman struggling with multiple shopping bags and a young college student checking his phone nervously. The diverse mix of customers provided good opportunities to observe staff interactions across different demographic groups. When her turn arrived, Margaret approached Maria's window with a warm smile. "Good morning, Maria. I'd like to make a deposit today." Maria's face brightened with recognition and genuine pleasure. "Good morning, Ms. Chun. It's wonderful to see you again. How can I assist you today?" The interaction was markedly different from their previous encounter. Maria's confidence and professionalism reflected the positive changes in training and workplace culture. She processed Margaret's routine transaction efficiently while maintaining friendly conversation that made the experience pleasant rather than merely functional. David Thompson, observing from his office, approached the window area with a notably different demeanor than he had displayed 3 weeks earlier. His appearance was neat and professional, and his body language conveyed respect rather than suspicion or arrogance. "Ms. Chun, welcome back to our branch," David said with genuine courtesy. "I hope we can provide you with excellent service today." Margaret studied his transformation with interest. The coaching and training had clearly had significant impact on his approach to customer interactions. While he was obviously still nervous about her presence, his behavior was now appropriate for a banking professional. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I'm impressed with the improvements I'm seeing throughout the branch," Margaret replied, acknowledging his efforts while maintaining professional boundaries. The brief exchange demonstrated that David had learned to treat all customers with respect, regardless of their apparent status or his personal assumptions about their financial resources. This fundamental shift represented exactly the kind of cultural change Margaret had hoped to achieve. After completing her transaction, Margaret spent additional time observing other customer interactions throughout the branch. She watched David assist an elderly gentleman with a complicated trust fund inquiry, maintaining patience and professionalism even when the customer became confused about required documentation. She also observed Sarah Williams helping a young mother open a college savings account for her infant daughter. Sarah's enthusiasm and knowledge about different savings options created a positive experience that would likely result in a long-term customer relationship. The contrast with the branch's previous culture was striking. 3 weeks ago, customer service had been inconsistent and often influenced by staff assumptions about customer importance. Now, every interaction reflected the same high standards regardless of customer demographics or transaction complexity. Margaret left the branch and drove to the regional headquarters to meet with James Morrison. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for the following week, and she wanted to provide comprehensive updates on the customer service improvement initiative. "The transformation at 5th Street has exceeded my expectations," Margaret reported. "The staff is engaged, customers are satisfied, and even David Thompson has demonstrated remarkable improvement in his management approach." James had been monitoring the situation closely and shared Margaret's positive assessment. "The coaching program has been particularly effective. Thompson's communication skills have improved dramatically, and his customer satisfaction scores have increased by 40%. However, both leaders understood that sustained change would require ongoing attention and reinforcement. The initial enthusiasm for new training programs could fade over time without proper support systems, and accountability measures. We need to make customer service training an ongoing priority rather than a one-time intervention, Margaret decided. I want quarterly refresher courses for all management staff and monthly coaching sessions for anyone showing performance concerns. The investment in training represented a significant budget allocation, but the returns were already evident in customer retention rates and new account openings. Branches that had implemented the new service standards were outperforming their previous metrics by substantial margins. Margaret also reviewed data from the mystery shopper program that had been implemented system-wide. Professional evaluators posing as regular customers visited branches unannounced to assess real-world service quality. The program provided objective feedback about staff performance and identified areas needing additional attention. The mystery shopper reports from Fifth Street were consistently positive, noting the dramatic improvement in customer treatment and staff professionalism. However, the reports from other branches revealed that problems similar to those at Fifth Street existed throughout the system, though usually in less extreme forms. We need to expand the training program to all branches immediately, Margaret concluded. The Fifth Street situation was just the tip of the iceberg. We have cultural issues that require comprehensive addressing across the entire organization. The scope of necessary changes was substantial, but Margaret was committed to ensuring that every customer received respectful treatment regardless of their apparent status or the branch they visited. This commitment reflected her personal values as well as sound business strategy. At the Fifth Street branch, the afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Harold Peterson, the retired teacher who had been treated with excessive deference during David's overcompensation phase, returned to open an additional account for his grandson's college fund. This time, David's interaction with Harold was professional but appropriately balanced. He provided excellent service without the obsequious behavior that had made Harold uncomfortable during his previous visit. The improvement demonstrated that David had learned to treat all customers with equal respect rather than simply adjusting his prejudices. Harold noticed the positive change and complimented David on the improved service quality. "You seem much more relaxed today. The whole atmosphere in here feels more professional than it did a few weeks ago." David accepted the feedback graciously, understanding that his previous behavior had created discomfort even when he had been trying to provide special treatment. The coaching had taught him that consistent professionalism was more valuable than dramatic gestures or excessive attention. As the business day concluded, Margaret reviewed customer feedback forms that had been submitted throughout the day. The comments were overwhelmingly positive, with particular praise for staff courtesy and helpful attitudes. Several customers specifically mentioned that they planned to recommend the branch to friends and family members. This organic word-of-mouth marketing was the most valuable result of the service improvements. Satisfied customers became advocates for the bank, driving new business growth that justified the investment in training and cultural change. Margaret also noted that employee satisfaction surveys showed significant improvement at branches where the new training had been implemented. Staff members reported feeling more confident in their roles and better equipped to handle challenging situations. The improved workplace culture was benefiting employees as well as customers. The evening news featured a brief segment about the viral banking story that had sparked the organization's customer service revolution. The reporter interviewed several customers who praised the positive changes they had experienced since the incident became public. One customer, Janet Morrison, spoke enthusiastically about the transformation at her local branch. "The difference is like night and day. The staff has always been nice, but now they seem more confident and helpful. It's actually enjoyable to go to the bank now instead of feeling like a chore." The positive media coverage provided additional validation for the changes that had been implemented. Public recognition of the improvement efforts reinforced the value of Margaret's decision to use the confrontation as a catalyst for positive transformation rather than simply punishing the individuals involved. 6 months after the confrontation that had changed everything, Margaret Chin stood before the quarterly board meeting to present the final results of the Customer Service Transformation Initiative. The data she was about to share exceeded even her optimistic projections when the program had been launched following the Fifth Street incident. Customer satisfaction scores have improved by an average of 38% across all participating branches, Margaret announced to the assembled board members. customer retention rates have increased by 22%, and new account openings are up 45% in areas where the enhanced training has been implemented. The financial impact was equally impressive. Branches with improved customer service were generating significantly more revenue through increased customer loyalty and positive word-of-mouth referrals. The return on investment for the training program had exceeded expectations within just 4 months. Board member Patricia Hamilton raised her hand. "Margaret, these results are remarkable. Can you provide specific examples of how the training has changed actual customer interactions?" Margaret smiled as she prepared to share the story that had started it all. 6 months ago, I conducted an unannounced inspection at our Fifth Street branch. The experience was eye-opening in ways I hadn't expected. She recounted the encounter with David Thompson, emphasizing the systemic problems that had been revealed rather than focusing on individual failures. The board listened intently as she described the transformation that had followed, from emergency training programs to comprehensive cultural change. "The manager who initially created the problem has become one of our most improved performers," Margaret continued. "His customer satisfaction scores now rank in the top 10% of all branch managers system-wide." At the Fifth Street branch, David Thompson was indeed experiencing the most successful period of his banking career. The coaching and training that had initially felt like punishment had evolved into valuable professional development that enhanced every aspect of his work. His relationship with staff members had improved dramatically as he learned to communicate more effectively and treat everyone with respect. The branch's team culture was now collaborative rather than hierarchical, with employees feeling comfortable suggesting improvements and raising concerns. Maria Rodriguez, in her role as assistant branch manager, had become a mentor for new employees throughout the regional system. Her expertise in handling unusual situations and executive authentication procedures was now part of the standard training curriculum for tellers at all branches. The Fifth Street branch had been selected as a model location for training new managers. Visitors came regularly to observe the customer service standards and team dynamics that had emerged from the crisis 6 months earlier. On this particular afternoon, David was training Jennifer Walsh, a newly promoted manager from the downtown branch. Jennifer had heard the story of the Fifth Street transformation and was eager to learn the specific techniques that had produced such dramatic improvement. The key insight was learning that every customer deserves the same level of respect, David explained as they observed staff interactions. "It doesn't matter how someone is dressed or what kind of transaction they're conducting. Professional courtesy should be consistent." Jennifer watched Maria assist an elderly customer with a complex estate planning question. Despite the transaction's complexity and the customer's confusion about required documentation, Maria remained patient and helpful throughout the 45-minute interaction. 6 months ago, I would have been frustrated by that kind of situation, David admitted. I would have focused on the inconvenience to other customers rather than the individual person who needed help. The coaching taught me to see each customer as someone deserving my best effort. The transformation in David's perspective was genuine and comprehensive. He had internalized the lessons rather than simply changing his surface behavior to avoid further problems. This fundamental shift made him an effective teacher for other managers who were struggling with similar issues. Margaret's presentation to the board continued with data from mystery shopper evaluations conducted throughout the system. The improvement in service quality was measurable and consistent across all demographic groups and transaction types. "We've eliminated the service disparities that previously existed based on customer appearance or perceived status," Margaret reported. "A construction worker receives the same courteous treatment as a business executive, and a college student gets the same level of assistance as a retiree." This equality of treatment had become a point of pride for employees throughout the organization. Staff members frequently mentioned in satisfaction surveys that they felt better about their work when they could provide excellent service to everyone rather than having to make judgments about customer importance. The program's success had attracted attention from other financial institutions seeking to improve their own customer service standards. Margaret had received inquiries from competing banks asking for guidance on implementing similar training initiatives. However, she understood that the real value of the program lay not in the specific training techniques, but in the commitment to ongoing improvement and accountability. Sustainable change required continuous attention rather than one-time interventions. We're implementing permanent monitoring systems to ensure these improvements are maintained, Margaret told the board. Customer service will now be weighted equally with financial performance in all management evaluations. The policy change represented a fundamental shift in organizational priorities. Previously, customer service had been considered important but secondary to sales targets and profit margins. Now it was recognized as essential for long-term business success. At the Fifth Street branch, the day's final customer was Thomas Bradley, the retired postal worker who had been among the first to hear rumors about the famous confrontation. He had become a regular visitor, not just for banking services, but because he enjoyed the consistently positive experience. "You know, David," Thomas said as he completed his transaction, "this place has become the friendliest bank in the neighborhood. Whatever happened here a few months ago, it sure worked out well for everyone." David smiled genuinely. "We learned some valuable lessons about treating customers the way we'd want to be treated ourselves. It makes coming to work more enjoyable for everyone." The conversation reflected the authentic cultural change that had occurred. David's improved attitude wasn't performed for management evaluation. It had become his natural approach to customer service because he had learned to find satisfaction in helping others. As the branch prepared to close for the day, Maria gathered the team for their weekly improvement meeting. These sessions had become opportunities for staff members to share successful customer interactions and discuss ways to enhance service quality further. "I had a great conversation with Mrs. Patterson today about college savings options for her granddaughter," Sarah Williams reported. "She was so appreciative of the time we spent exploring different plans that she's referring her daughter and son-in-law to open accounts with us." The staff took pride in these success stories, understanding that their individual efforts contributed to the branch's reputation and the bank's overall success. Customer service had evolved from a job requirement into a source of professional satisfaction. Margaret concluded her board presentation with projections for the program's expansion to all remaining branches over the next fiscal year. The evidence clearly demonstrates that investing in customer service training produces measurable returns in customer loyalty, revenue growth, and employee satisfaction. The board voted unanimously to approve full funding for system-wide implementation of the enhanced training program. The success at Fifth Street and other pilot locations had proven that cultural change was possible with proper commitment and resources. After the meeting, Margaret reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with her decision to conduct a simple customer service evaluation. The confrontation with David Thompson had revealed problems that required addressing, but it had also created opportunities for positive transformation throughout the organization. The story had become legendary within the banking system, not as an example of executive power, but as proof that individual incidents could catalyze meaningful change when approached with wisdom and commitment to improvement. 6 months later, the Fifth Street branch stood as a testament to the possibility of redemption and growth. David Thompson had transformed from a source of customer complaints into a model of professional service. Maria Rodriguez had advanced her career while helping others develop their skills. The entire staff had learned that treating customers with respect created more job satisfaction than meeting sales quotas alone. Margaret's unannounced inspection had accomplished far more than evaluating one branch's performance. It had sparked a cultural revolution that improved experiences for thousands of customers and employees throughout the banking system. The confrontation that had begun with a manager's arrogant challenge, "I'll pay you double if you have a balance," had ultimately cost the bank hundreds of thousands of dollars in training and development expenses. However, the investment had generated millions of dollars in additional revenue through improved customer relationships and business growth. More importantly, it had created a workplace culture where every customer was valued and every employee was empowered to provide exceptional service. The transformation demonstrated that even the most negative situations could be converted into opportunities for positive change with proper leadership and genuine commitment to improvement. The story became part of new employee orientation, not to embarrass anyone who had been involved, but to illustrate the bank's commitment to treating all customers with dignity and respect. It served as a reminder that appearances could be deceiving and that professional courtesy should never depend on assumptions about customer status or importance. As Margaret drove home from the board meeting, she thought about the upcoming quarterly inspection schedule. She would continue making unannounced visits to branches throughout the system, but now she expected to find consistent excellence rather than hoping to identify problems that needed correction. The transformation had been successful beyond her most optimistic projections, proving that organizational culture could be changed when leadership was committed to supporting employees in developing better skills and attitudes. The investment in training and coaching had created sustainable improvements that would benefit customers and staff for years to come. The simple lesson that had emerged from 6 months of intensive change was profound in its clarity. Treating every customer with respect and professionalism wasn't just good business practice. It was the foundation of a successful organization that could thrive in an increasingly competitive marketplace. Margaret watched the news segment from her home office while reviewing plans for the next phase of the improvement initiative. The success at 5th Street and other pilot branches had proven that systemic change was possible with proper commitment and resources. The quarterly board meeting would provide an opportunity to present comprehensive data on the program's effectiveness and secure approval for expansion to all remaining branches. The financial benefits alone justified the investment, but the improvement in customer relationships provided additional value that would pay dividends for years to come. As she prepared for bed, Margaret reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with a simple attempt to conduct an anonymous customer service evaluation. The confrontation with David Thompson had exposed fundamental problems that required addressing, but it had also created opportunities for positive change that benefited everyone involved. The transformation demonstrated that even negative experiences could be converted into valuable learning opportunities with proper leadership and commitment to improvement. The key was focusing on systematic solutions rather than individual blame, creating sustainable changes that would prevent similar problems in the future. Performance has been satisfactory. We're implementing additional training opportunities to help everyone feel more confident handling unusual situations. The reassurance helped reduce the staff's anxiety, but questions remained about David's future and the branch's reputation. The past 2 days had fundamentally changed the workplace dynamics, and it would take time to establish a new equilibrium. Maria approached James after the general meeting. "Sir, I wanted to ask about the authentication procedures we used yesterday. Did I handle everything correctly?" James smiled approvingly. "You followed proper protocols exactly as you should have. Your professionalism throughout the situation was exemplary." The positive feedback was meaningful for Maria, who had been questioning her own performance. Knowing that she had handled her responsibilities correctly helped restore her confidence and provided validation for her customer service approach. As the business day continued, the 5th Street branch gradually returned to more normal operations. However, everyone understood that significant changes were coming, and the comfortable routines they had known were permanently altered. The incident had created opportunities for positive transformation, but it had also exposed fundamental problems that would require sustained effort to resolve. The real test would be whether the organization could learn from this experience and implement lasting improvements that would benefit all customers and employees. At 4 o'clock, Margaret received a detailed report from the security authentication system about the morning's incident. The report confirmed that all proper procedures had been followed once her executive card was presented, but it also revealed that David had attempted to cancel the authentication process twice before being overridden by regional security. This information suggested that David had not simply made an error in judgment, but had actively resisted following proper banking protocols when they contradicted his personal assumptions. Such behavior indicated a more serious problem than poor customer service training could address. Margaret scheduled a conference call with the regional management team for the following morning. The 5th Street situation had revealed weaknesses in training, oversight, and corporate culture that required immediate attention at the highest levels. As the business day ended, David sat alone in his office contemplating his uncertain future. He had spent the afternoon alternating between extremes of customer treatment, unable to find a balanced approach to professional service. The customers who had witnessed his morning humiliation had spread the story throughout their networks. By evening, social media posts about the incident had gained significant attention, with many people sharing similar stories of poor customer service at various businesses. Margaret's unannounced inspection had accomplished far more than she had originally intended. Not only had it exposed serious problems at one branch, but it had also created momentum for company-wide improvements that would benefit all customers and employees throughout the banking system. As Margaret walked toward the exit, she reflected on the valuable information she had gathered. This branch clearly needed significant improvements in customer service training and management oversight. The way David had treated what he perceived as an ordinary customer revealed serious problems that required immediate attention. The lobby remained unusually quiet as customers and staff processed what they had just witnessed. Maria returned to serving the next customer, but her hands were still shaking slightly from the unprecedented encounter. Outside the bank, Margaret pulled out her phone to make several calls. Her unscheduled inspection had revealed far more than she had expected, and there would be significant changes coming to this branch very soon.